Larry, you bring the good news. You just bring the good news, Larry. I mean, how much better does it get than going up another 11 and ending the day on exactly 250.00.
I wonder what the volume was.
Oh, you know, I know I should. I don't pay much attention to the volume, Larry. So
The volume is really very interesting when you get such massive increases because if it's on low volume, that's not a lot of, that's a steep rise with not a lot of conviction. If it's on very heavy volume, then that could be all about options. If it's mid-range volume, that's very interesting.
and then it happened on a day when the stock market itself was just kind of flat, kind of just lay there. The Mag 7 were kind of mixed, but Dan Levy did come out today, and he says he thinks third quarter deliveries will come in at about 470, and that's 10,000 higher than the street consensus. And that would be up 8% year over year. And so
Well, that's close to where AJ is.
AJ's even higher. He's at 480 something, 483 maybe, 40.
I thought 477, yeah, maybe 480. I mean, China's deliveries have been good, but Europe has not been good.
No.
Europe has been very poor. Let me see if I can see the volume here today. Oh, it's up here, and it was 80 million. That's that's fairly convincing.
Okay.
That's fairly convincing. It's not low volume, and it's not extreme volume.
It also finished on the high.
It
So
finished on the high.
yeah.
It was higher than average volume. It wasn't at the extremes of volume. Looks like there's demand for the stock.
Well, I've got only 15 points to go to get to my 465 before 1010. So I think I've got it. I think
265.
yeah, I, 260. I have too many numbers in my head, Larry. There's just too
I
many.
thought it was 260.
265, 265. It's my number.
Really?
Yeah, been all along.
And
Now,
what will it be the day after 1010?
it all depends on what happens. I really believe that on a reveal, and I think you taught me this, Larry, that when it's a reveal, there's a chance it'll go up after the reveal if the
That's
news
right. Yeah.
beats, if the news is better.
Saw that at the Y and we saw it at the Cybertruck.
There you go. See, I learned that from you.
Yeah.
I sit at your knee, Larry, because you're older than me.
That's true. I am. I'm older than everybody.
You're closing in on God, huh? So, all right. So that was good news today. All that was good news. The other big news, and maybe this is impacting the stock a little bit today too, is lots of FSD finally breaking. I know you were very nervous there last week that
Very nervous.
all behind, but we got 12.5.2.2, which you received, which I'd like to have you talk about that. But then point 4 came out today, and then Park on the Cybertruck.
Well, let me just point out, I've had point 2 on my X, which is an AI4 car.
Right.
It was the AI3 car
Right.
that I hadn't got the 2.2 yet.
Right.
And that was, my concern. And that was allayed because that release was really, I would say, as close as you could get to AI4.
Yeah.
I've only done one drive, admittedly quite a long drive, and a very taxing drive. I went to all the difficult spots and on the freeways and so on. And I must say that it behaved within decimal points of my hardware 4 car.
Good. Very good to hear. And we've been hearing that from a lot of folks. And then the point 4 today, I think the big difference on point 4 was that the ASS was supposed to be a lot better.
Yep. The point 2 on my Model 3, I could actually tell the exact spots where it would be an anomaly and not necessarily a failure.
Uh-huh.
For example, turning into a multi-lane street just outside my home, sort of one of the feeder streets into the main road that passes my development. Um, it would always shudder in the middle of the island and try and turn into the island itself, and then
Oh,
yeah, I mean it was very very shaky. And in the old days, I used to have to grab the wheel because I thought it was going to turn into it. Later on, I allowed it to. I wanted to see if it would actually turn into it.
right.
And didn't. It managed to avoid it at the last minute, but it was very frightening. But smooth as smooth as butter. Just went around the turn exactly, and I did that 3 or 4 times. So I did, give it the really, really tough try. And on the almost impossible selection of lanes,
Right.
it was much later than hardware 4.
Hmm.
But I've seen hardware 4 be as late as that.
Hmm.
And I didn't manage to do that a second time. Anyway, I'm boring you with detail. Bottom line is very successful indeed. And I think anybody who's feared of hardware 3, put those fears aside. This is just the beginning. Hardware 3 is going to do great.
All right, super. And then anything on Park for your Cybertruck? Because that apparently has gone to everybody. Everybody.
Nothing. I mean, guys, listen, I'm sitting here waiting for you, and I was, right up there in the top of the charts for the number of cyber. Anyway, give me my update for my Cybertruck, please.
I know. How come you're being left out here at the
But
so
I'm desperate for FSD for that Cybertruck because when IFT5 is going to fly, I'm going to, drive to Boca Chica. It's a heck of a drive.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
3 days.
And they did say today, somebody said today that they're still saying that will be the Cybertruck version will be out before the end of the month. So that's 4 days, 5 days. Yeah.
Doesn't seem possible, does it?
So you also been working on the hybrid story, and I know you had some setbacks and then anyway, without getting into all of that, tease us about the video that you're going to do.
Well, the hybrid is a very worrying trend because hybrids are growing, sales in hybrids are growing dramatically faster than sales of EVs.
Mhm.
And the question is why?
Mhm.
And the answer is a little complicated. Part of it is money. Part of it is BYD's immense production you know, of the type of the hybrids. Part of it is the dealer network.
Mhm.
The dealer network cannot afford not to sell hybrids. They can't afford to sell EVs. They
Mhm.
just cannot. So, and then part of it is that some of the incentives in Europe rolled off. So
Yeah.
you got this perfect storm. Um, when governments give the same amount of, almost the same amount of benefit, if you're a hybrid or an EV, and you have dealerships supporting the hybrids, and you don't have dealerships supporting the EVs, and you have some of this negative stuff coming out about EVs. So all of this plays into it, and then you have the normal sort of conservative nature of the buyer.
Yeah.
So all of this is very important. And then, of course, pricing plays into it as well. And on top of that, you've got the awful EVs, the really terrible EVs that the legacy manufacturers OEMs have been putting out.
And
Anyway,
there
so
are
those are the teasers. Those are the elements of what's going on. But it is going on, and the question is, when does it reverse? When does it change? And the circumstances for the change are going to be there. This is a sugar high, and people who buy EVs today are being silly because they're not going to retain their value.
you mean that buy hybrids rather?
Sorry. Oh, big mistake. The people who buy hybrids are really they're gambling with their money because I don't think hybrids are going to retain their value.
Right. Right. Yeah. And even if they do retain their value, it's one of those things where you get into the thing 2 years from now, let's say, and have autonomy now as well, to lure you in. That's going to be one more reason that you might not want to be in the car. So speaking of hybrids, did you know that the president or CEO of Stellantis is out?
I was expecting that to happen any moment. So yeah, I'm not surprised.
So he will not get a contract extension. Stellantis said on Monday it's begun a search for a candidate. This is from AJ, by the way. They said on Monday it began a search for a candidate to succeed him. His contract is set to expire in 2026. So they've given him a lot of notice. It said this was highly predictable. Stellantis has been the fastest market share loser amongst all the large automakers. Despite its large size, it was expected to move up to number 2, but it was number 3 overall sales. It's become only the 6th largest EV seller, and has not ever, managed to get moving towards a higher point on. So I think Toyota's number 1, Volkswagen number 2, Stellantis number 3. And a year ago, Larry, I think I said with you on the show that Stellantis, they were the most profitable of all the companies. They're the highest margins of any of the big companies. And I was like, they're doing everything right. And it just all fell apart.
That's a dreadful business.
Hard business.
The auto business is a dreadful business. It is so capital intensive. Products take such a long time to bring to market. And then, if they have a short life, you're dead. And then some of these companies have got unions.
Yeah.
And unions don't have a real, in my experience, well, not my experience, in the experience of the OEMs, unions are not that supportive of, their employers. So here we have Volkswagen, entering into this
Spiral.
fool's paradise, of a union. I think Volkswagen is the next to go. Stellantis will fall for sure, but Volkswagen is going to be a mighty crash because it's going to take down the state, the province of Germany that it's in. I don't know how the Germans are going to get out of what they got themselves into. I really don't. I don't understand it.
Yeah, it's very unusual. I mean, we've seen the story before. How many products, Larry, have you and I seen in our lifetime that have gone through these massive, newspapers, magazines, film, film cameras, flashlights. I mean, there's so many different things that have been completely put out of business.
Camera manufacturers are out of business,
Right.
except for the very large ones that have kind of adapted to a degree. But I mean, that business is a shadow of its former self.
Yeah, so it seems like
Kodak.
nobody learns. Nobody learns from these massive changes that come. And part of it is, I get off on a little tangent here, Larry, but I think it's an important one for people who are trying to understand markets. You see it in the airline industry most of all. They get this massive overhead. So you get a Delta, American, United, they have these massive overheads. They get sloppy, they get loose on their stuff, but they also have a massive pension issue that they have to address. And then along comes the new guy. The new guy doesn't have the massive overhead. They don't have the pensions. They don't have the unions, and they come in, they undercut, and they start stealing market share like crazy. And you can watch it happen over and over and over again. I mean,
so I tell you, the transport industry is a terrible industry.
Right, yes. And that's what's going to happen with the autos. I mean, yeah, it's got it.
Dreadful industry, whether you're flying people or you're flying, cargo, it's a dreadful industry to be in. Oversupply is the norm.
Yeah. So we have on the economic front, we've got the Kobasi letter today saying that this is the most resilient market in history. The number of S&P 500 stocks outperforming the index hit 339 quarter to date. the highest in 22 years. This is also in line with levels seen in 2000 before the dot-com bubble popped. I'm not sure that's a good comparison for lots of reasons. The share has nearly tripled compared to quarter two, when 125 stocks outperformed. Interestingly, Magnificent Seven stocks are underperforming the index for the first time in almost 2 years. So I thought that was an interesting mix of information.
Well, it had to happen, right?
Yeah.
It has to be a return to the norm, particularly when there's a re-inversion or a reversion back to the mean. So, those overperformers are going to underperform and the underperformers are going to overperform. But I think we're entering into a very, very difficult period. My thesis, I see only the bad side of things. And so I think that I think we're going into a tough time. It's interesting because we're looking for a very big improvement in Tesla in the coming year, but it's going to be a very tough year for the auto industry, very tough year for the auto industry. And so, that's kind of counterintuitive thinking about Tesla having a good year next year is kind of counterintuitive.
Well, in my book, or books, sort of books, let's just call it book, on recessions, one of the things that I state over and over again is the best thing that you can do in a recession is to have new product lines. Tesla is going to be so replete with phenomenal product lines. We think we haven't seen them yet.
There's nothing like a recession to find really outstanding stocks for the future. I mean, the amount of really, really great investments that are made in a recession far outweigh those great investments that are made at the top of the market naturally. I mean, it's just a truism, but that's just, but right now we're sitting at a market that's at record highs. Everywhere you look, it's at record highs. Not a great time to get into the market, to be honest.
Yes, and of course, I've been saying for a while that I'm expecting a 10 to 20% sell-off on the S&P. I think that has to happen, probably happens before the election. And then by the end of the year, we're back to all-time highs. That's my call.
I think it's going to be hard. We're going to be hard pressed to get there. A lot depends on what happens on the election, a lot.
Of course. So, Larry, let's assume, because you and I are almost exactly on the same page, that we're in a recession, near a recession, it's not a bad recession, it's a recession. When do you think we come out of the recession?
I think mid of next year. I think we'll see a return to normalcy. I mean, but the problem is the market is so high. Interest rates, although they're moderating, they're still not exactly low. Property is really at a standstill. The market could take a 25, 30% crack quite easily. It could take a 50% crack as well. And so I personally think that, it's time to keep one's powder dry. And really, even if one's not keeping all one's powder dry, you're not going to lose that much money because there's not that much upside in my judgment.
Yeah, exactly.
I could be wrong.
Exactly. Larry, I'm going to go on a little tangent for 1 second and not continue with the broad economic picture, because I almost forgot to mention this is a really good news Monday because Tesla is now ahead for the year.
So it is.
We buy 1%, but we'll take whatever we can get. So
well, it's got a ways to go to get back to the high, right?
Right. Yes, but we're ahead for the year, green for the year as of today.
Pity there's only one S&P index, because we could, if we were going to be put into another S&P index, maybe it'll also go through the roof again.
All right, so going back to the market I mean the economy in general. So the ISM came out this morning and said that there was such a low level of optimism about the coming months. So to our earlier statement, and we're not trying to just be, big negative Nellies here, but they said no hiring at all taking place, none.
Yeah.
Expectations for lower sales going forward, and again, lowest level of optimism since I think 2022. The consumer is done. This is a separate story. Consumer is done, says Danielle DiMartino Booth of QI Research on CNBC earlier today. She says they have no money for the big purchases. And she goes further on. The quote is, the second factor is the number of part-time workers in the US, which has climbed to an all-time high.
Yeah.
Suggests that the hiring picture isn't as strong as it may appear. The number of employees that usually work part-time climbed to 28.2 million in August. That's the highest number since the government began recording the data. She says, we're not seeing these people pour into the unemployment claims pool, however, because she says what they're doing is they're going out and getting a job with Uber or Lyft or some other kind of part-time, secondary part-time job, or second or third even sometimes. And I have seen this with some of the young people that I know in particular. They'll get that job delivering or doing Uber. She says it's a much different economy than we had in 2008 because the gig economy has exploded in that period.
Yeah, and I mean, how many people can it absorb? Can it offset, a real recession? Probably not, because they're serving people who are using, who are in working conditions and who are earning well. When that earning goes down, then do they take an Uber? I don't know. So times are going to get very tough in the first half of next year, I think. And I just get a sense that generally the first 6 months of a term of a new president, there's going to be a new president, whichever president it is, it's going to be a new president, is really a tough sledding period. And, the whole idea is that they do much better afterwards. But it's hard to tell who's going to be the next president.
Pretty darn close. Pretty darn close.
Yeah.
Polling.
Trump is not really out there stumping. He's not working very hard. I think he's feeling his age.
I've heard that story, but he is spending a lot more time on these long form interviews. And
that's true. That's true, but not as many interviews as he's done before.
Oh, really? Not as many interviews, but they're long form. They're all these hour and 2 hour long ones.
Yeah. And the question is, who listens to them?
Well, like sometimes 1 million or 2 million people. That's kind of the point.
Yeah.
These are getting big audiences compared to 10,000 or 15,000 that you might get at a local convention. I'm a little more worried actually about the ground game. You can have your lead in the polls. How's your ground game though? How you doing at getting the vote in? And that's another.
Yeah, and Kamala has a lot of money. I've never seen anything quite like it. She's got more money than, I don't know what's going to happen with it, but yeah, this is the weirdest election that we've ever experienced. And I have to say, Kamala is the weirdest candidate we've ever experienced. Can you believe? I mean, Biden didn't appear much, but
right.
If Kamala Harris wins this election, will it lead to a completely different style of? Will they forever keep the candidate under wraps? Will they forever keep the candidate behind doors? Will it be the end of the candidate getting out amongst the people? I don't know.
It's very bizarre, very, very weird. And I have a suspicion it's not going to work. I have a suspicion that this is a very bad strategy, but it may be worse to put her out there. That's the problem.
Yeah. And I just can't get over the show Veep. Did you ever watch the show?
Did, I think.
I mean, this is, I just have to say, it feels like Veep all over again.
Well, it does remind me of some of the West Wing stories. We had some of that to the intrigue.
No, this is Veep. I have nothing against Kamala. I just don't know who she is, what she stands for. I don't know. I really don't know. I can't get past the what they call the word salad because it's the same stuff every time. It's and on the other hand, you have Trump who just I mean it's hard to get anything cogent out of him. So all he tells you that he's going to do great and that he's going to be a genius and he's going to fix everything. So between the two of them, I don't know. I want to have somebody who's, I want to have an alternative. Who any alternative will do.
You'll take a third party if they had a chance. All right. Well, listen, the other thing I wanted to talk to you briefly about again, because we talked about this a little on Friday, is that Gary Black went deeper into his discussion about how he sees a narrative change. AJ then gave a brief follow-on, also saying that he sees a narrative change. I claim to be, the prince of narrative changes, and I missed it, or at least missed that it was time to talk about it. I just think that the clouds, not the clouds, the stars are aligning in such a way that the street is going to begin to see the energy combined with the products, combined with lower interest rates, combined with all of that is stuff that the street can actually get their arms around.
Well, we've both spoken about it at length on this show. Anybody who's actually sat through our shows, and I know they drag on a lot, but anybody who sat through our shows understand that we've spoken about this a lot. I think there is a change. I think the change happened when Elon said we've turned the page. I think that was the moment. Mm-hmm. I think that everything else is playing out according to it, and the public have begun to realize it. And so we're getting there. But I think there are a few rocky moments still to come. I think there's some ups and downs to come. I think it has to play out. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's one thing for Gary Black to see it, but then you've got all the other PMs, on Wall Street who have to align, because Gary Black's a lot more aligned with us, with the retail shareholders, and much closer to the company. Yes. I mean, he keeps very close tabs. He follows it very carefully. And even though we have differences with him, he really understands the innards of the company a lot better than most of the street, except for there's a few people on the street who are pretty aware of what's going on. But yeah, I think you're right. I think there is a change coming, and the change is real, mm-hmm. and the realization of the change is also becoming real. So I think there are two aspects. The one is that the turning of the corner, everything for next year turns on the progress of FSD.
Right.
Everything.
Yes.
Yeah, the bot is coming. Yes, the production of the Cybertruck is going to be there. Yes, the next version, the robotaxi, and the next small or Model 2.5 is coming. But everything turns right now, on getting those numbers there.
Right. And it's interesting that the conversation also continues with such disparate viewpoints on whether to put supervised drivers into the cars immediately, and let the app start to learn how to be a good robotaxi even before the car is got the capability.
It's possible.
Yeah, so that's something that's
Elon hasn't indicated any interest in that.
I know. That's my point. It's like he hasn't ever said anything about it one way or the other that I can tell, except that he originally has provided us with this dream of one day there will be this massive change in value. But you could take the one day kind of biblically. One day is 1,000 years. It's an epic. It's an era, not just one day. Anyway, but it's maybe one of the most interesting conversations that's going on right now in the community is do we put in a supervised driver and get this darn thing, this app on the road, or do we wait until it's ready to do it without a driver?
Well, Uber has the opportunity of doing that because they have so many cars, so
Yeah.
many Teslas on the road.
Yeah.
They could do that. I mean, their drivers could do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And if I was in a position and I wanted to do it, I wouldn't go out myself. I'd hire some kid for $20 an hour to go out and do it. So
I would be very concerned about hiring a kid to do that because what you don't want to do is take the liability, the insurance liability, with a youngster in the car. You want somebody with some experience.
all right, a college kid. So, Larry, as already mentioned earlier, the market was weird. Well, the market wasn't weird. It was just Tesla did very much better than the market. Dow was up 61, NASDAQ up 26, S&P up 16, and Tesla up $11.75. Mixed on the Magnificent Seven, mixed on Cathie Wood stocks. PayPal and Square have been doing very well in this environment. I think they've got some new products out. I haven't paid a lot of attention, just seen a couple of headlines, but also I think interest rates coming down. Maybe they're figuring that PayPal and Square get some benefit out of that. I'm not sure. But that's what the market did today. Now then, what is it going to do?
The metals.
Huh? All right, let's go see what the gold, last time I checked, it hit an all-time high again. But let's just go to the bonds real quick first. Because I like to do it in the same order. Well, that's right, the bonds aren't out yet. So oil comes up next. Oil still sitting right where it's been. It's up 27 cents in the pre-market on the Texas Intermediate, 70.64. So we've got this range going again, like 68 to 72 on Texas Intermediate and $3 higher on Brent. Brent unchanged, actually. Natural gas today was up like another 4, 5, 6%. It is taking a little profit in the pre-market, down 0.46 but it's still at $2.60.
Wow.
That's a high mark. Here's that gold number. Are you ready?
Yeah.
2,652. I think that's coming off of the high for the day. The high was well, it was 2,653.80. So basically,
I think we'll see 2,000. Yeah. Do you think we'll get to 3,000 this year?
Well, at the rate it's going, it's up 35% for the year, I think. I think I read that on Kobasi earlier. 35% for the year. That's huge.
It wasn't under 2,000. No, 260. Yeah, it could have been. Sorry.
Yeah, up 35.
65. Yeah, you're right.
And then silver still sitting around 31. That's about where it's been now for a few days. Also very high, but not all-time high. It had a spike. I think there was a silver scam thing years ago. Larry, do you remember that?
Yeah, the Hunt brothers.
Huh?
The Hunt brothers.
The Hunt brothers.
The Hunt brothers from Texas went bankrupt, trying to corner the silver market. That was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So that spike, we're not going to be there for a while, but otherwise, pretty much at all-time highs, other than that one aberrant situation. Copper, your favorite, is down in the pre-market, but only 0.07%, but it's sitting at 4,344. That's up there pretty good.
Yeah, that's a surprise.
Dollar.
Yeah, I thought we'd see copper actually below $4, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, so the question that becomes one of the big questions I've been trying to analyze for the last few days is we've got all these commodities pretty much at lows. Now, copper's not at an all-time low by any stretch. Certainly, oil and gas, and they're not at all-time lows. But a lot of these commodities are at all-time lows. Does the recession take them even lower? Or will they start to percolate before there's a recovery? I'm not sure. Because people eventually shut down production. You can't keep producing and losing. So anyway, we'll see what happens on that. I haven't studied that previously. Bitcoin up 320. It is now getting back into its old range, 63,317. So it's very close to being back at the bottom of what used to be the range, but it got a long way to go to get back to 74. And the equities all down, but not much. The Dow 56 or 0.13, S&P down 6.25 or 0.11%, and the NASDAQ 2975 or 0.15% down. So all kind of in the same percentage there, around 11-12%. So that would suggest a soft opening tomorrow, Larry. Of course, so much can happen in 12 hours.
The war in the Middle East again.
What a crazy weekend was that, Larry? I mean, your brethren.
Exploding pages. Who could dream that up?
I mean, I'm sorry I laughed out loud.
Yeah.
Not good.
God knocked it off.
Not good to laugh at people.
But you know, of the top, I think it was 6 or 7, of the top 7 officers of
Hezbollah.
Hezbollah. 5 of them have been decapitated.
Yeah.
Or 7 of the top 9. There are only 2 of the senior commanders left.
Yeah.
The first 3 levels of control. That's extraordinary. Not to mention all the captains and, who've been disabled by the exploding pages. But, they're still firing a lot of rockets. And it looks to me like Israel's mapped every single rocket, because they're actually, destroying one at a time, these launch sites. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I don't know. The people of Lebanon are the losers in all of this. Why they don't throw Hezbollah out and the Iranians out, I have no idea. Iran took control of Syria. They took control of Lebanon. They've taken control of Iraq almost completely. So, why do the Lebanese put up with us? They're such a great, Lebanon was such a great country, is such a great country. It beats me.
I know I have never visited Lebanon, but I know that a lot of stories in terms of how beautiful and prosperous their beach communities were, a generation or 2 ago.
And the Lebanese people are so creative, so, they're so worldly and so creative. And there was a very large Christian community, a very large Muslim community. They got along great.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And, it was anyway.
Yeah. The Middle East has been this way. I'm going to mention the Bible the second time, Larry, but I years ago wrote a little newspaper for my church, and I put the headline that there was, trouble in the Middle East, and you didn't have to put a date on it. It's been throughout history. These groups have been just going after each other.
Certainly my entire life.
Well, again, but 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years. It's been going on 4,000, 5,000 years. Yeah. So I suppose we won't see the end of it anytime soon, unfortunately. Well, any last thoughts, Larry, about the markets, about the economy, about Tesla?
No, I'm sitting here waiting and drinking my Slivovitz, waiting for the world to end.
And your FSD for your truck. Those are the only 2 things, right?
If only my FSD would arrive, the world would be perfect.
Well, on that happy note, Good Time Monday, rather, will come to a close. It's been great talking to y'all.